Wanted to talk about the Bengals kicking game in this edition of In the Trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics. So I thought, who better to talk about that than Jim Breech, Bengals all-time leading scorer, kicker extraordinaire. And we caught up with Jim Breech and talked about Drue Chrisman's initial action, his pro debut, how excellent it was. Talked about Money Mac, his ability to kick in seriously poor conditions in Pittsburgh. Crowd noise, poor field conditions, windy, cold. And we talked about a lot of other things with respect to the Cincinnati Bengals, because Jim Breech is not just a kicker. Jim Breech played quarterback, played point guard, was a shortstop in baseball. Jim Breech is an athlete. Jim Breech knows his sports. It's fun catching up with Jim Breech. Thanks very much for joining us in the trenches with Dave Lapham, brought to you by First Star Logistics. And we're here with the all-time leading scorer for the Cincinnati Bengals, none other than the legendary, iconic Jim Breech. Jimbo, what's up, my man?
Hey, Lap. I've never been considered in the trenches. I'm excited. I never got that close to getting my head pounded in.
You're looking good in the trenches, my man. You really are, It's good. So what do you think of your overall assessment? I mean, we had the bye week, the coaches, look back on things and they self-scouted and, they've like this, don't like that, whatever they're doing. And they probably, here's what we need to do better. Here's what we're doing well. What's your assessment? You've got a great eye for football. I mean, you've been around it your entire life. As you look at the Cincinnati Bengals just after the bye, they had that first game after the bye against the Pittsburgh Steelers. What's your assessment? Where are the Cincinnati Bengals in your mind?
I think they're really trending in the right direction. Really starting a few weeks back. I think that Atlanta game really got them going. They threw the ball great there. Then they just fell apart in Cleveland. I don't know if it's a matchup issue or what it seems to be against the Browns. Then Carolina, who's tough against the run, they run over them. So now you've had one game you threw for almost 500, then you run for 2-something. So how do you defend these guys, right? So, and I think this showed here this week, Pittsburgh was pretty stout against the run, and they were able to throw the ball all over the field. And that's without Jamar Chase, in a few of these games. So, they're certainly trending, and the defense has been good all the way through. I mean, these guys just play well on defense, and getting Reader back, Awuzie being out really hurts, but right. Cam Taylor-Britt now is getting a few games under his belt. So I think Dax Hill, this would have been great for Dax Hill to have some time. So overall, doing great. And I think a weak link, I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about is, Kevin was really struggling. And he even admitted it. He said, I'd be great in warm-ups. I'm great during the week. And for whatever reason, I was getting into the games and really struggling with it. Now, I don't know, once they started suiting up Chrisman, because they were heading in that direction, but suiting him up in pregame,
right?
I'm not sure how that impacts anybody, and everybody would say, well, you got to do your job. Well, ultimately, you want to do the job that's a winning job, and you want to put your guys in the place to be successful, right? And I'm not sure having competition. It's a competition that's not a competition. If he's shooting up, kicking, then it's a competition. And for whatever reason, Kevin was struggling, and they made a move, and boy, he just did a great job. Had a great game, and as well as I do, that's probably as tough a place to play as there is in the league. They're crazy there. It's not a great field. I mean, we were talking earlier about the different games they had played even before they got to Sunday.
Right.
The field's completely chewed up. It's windy, it's cold, and you can't even hear yourself think. So overall, he handled that beautifully. Now, conversely, probably the fact that he got those warm-ups in pre-games and got to do that and do the team thing, and he's been doing it all along, he was probably more ready than many guys would be. Because a lot of times you don't get guys are coming in from the street and having to step in, and it's nice for him, for Drue, that he didn't have to. And I think Kevin's handled it particularly well. he was on the sideline helping them out. Wind conditions obviously are crazy. So I give Kevin all the credit in the world. It's one of those things where self-scout, right? You go on to buy, everybody's self-scouting, and Kevin self-scouted himself, and he talked about it. And they're going to do what they need to do to find wins, and they found it.
Kevin, like you talked about during the game, was I guess what you'd expect Kevin Huber to be and to do, because he's a great human being, and he's providing sweats, for Chrisman to wear. He's making sure that Chrisman gets the first football that he kicked for a souvenir. He pulls it aside and he gives it to him after the game. Just doing all the things that, he thought it would be great if he were in that situation, if somebody had done for him. He's doing it for Chrisman. I mean, that's just the kind of guy Kevin Huber is and the kind of teammate Kevin Huber is. That's why Kevin Huber's been part of the Bengals organization, not only a great punter, but just a great guy, right? I mean, he's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think back to when I was competing with the Raiders back in '79. I'd gotten beat out in '78, and that was different because the other guy and I we got along fine. But Earl Mann, he was older. Yeah. It was interesting. He was the same age I was when I got cut my last year. And he was really old to me then. Right. But he treated me, he'd say, "Where do you want to kick from?" He'd pick the muddiest, wettest spot he could find.
Really?
He wouldn't talk to me. And if he did, it just complete, he was a jerk to me. And we were competing, right? So I decided that was never going to be me. I wasn't going to allow that to happen because we're not competing. Literally, we're not competing against each other, because when I'm kicking, he's not kicking, and vice versa. So really, if I can't if I'm not good enough to win the job, then that's on me. That's not on him. And I always tried to do that going forward with Doug, and Doug did that, and hopefully that carried over when it got to Kevin and Lee. So I can't remember who was playing there when Kevin got there. So anyway, that's. Treat people the way you want to be treated. At the same time, compete your butt off.
Yep.
And then put your best foot forward. And if you think you're good enough, you got the confidence to go out there and do it. You've been doing all these years, then go out and do it. And that's what he's done. And so he's not kicking that day, and he did everything he could to help out Chrisman. And that's a great team player. You're absolutely right. Kevin's a great guy who has had a phenomenal career.
Yep.
And doesn't mean it's over. Chrisman might be the guy winning out this job. That doesn't mean Kevin can't go kick somewhere potentially. Mm-hmm. If it works out for Chrisman here, then he won't necessarily not have an opportunity somewhere else too.
Like you said, treat people the way you want to be treated. That's the golden rule, and the golden rule applies even in football. It applies in life. If you treat people the way you'd like to be treated, most times it's going to work out. There's no two ways about it. Like you mentioned, Chrisman in this game with the wind, the terrible field, the crowd noise, and all that, he performed two punts, not only inside the 20, inside the 10. He pins him at the 5-yard line. He pins him at the 9-yard line. The 5-yard line, he mishandles it and almost gets tackled for a safety. Right. He does get out of there, but his numbers. He averaged 50 yards a punt, 44.7 net. Those are pretty significant numbers for your first game punting in those kind of conditions. But he punted at LaSalle, went to Ohio State, so this wasn't foreign to him, right? How big an advantage is it in your high school and collegiate career? You may have faced some of these conditions that he faced. You're punting at the Big House against Michigan at the end of the year when it could be blustery and cold and all that kind of stuff. Having gone through those kind of experiences, do you think that was a big prep for him?
Absolutely. If you think about it, there's a whole bunch of colleges that have a lot more people in the stands than they have in the pros.
Right.
And if you're playing in these big games, and Ohio State played in, they're up for the national championships every year. Every year's a huge game, the Michigan game, obviously. The difference is, yes, he's been in that environment, but when you start getting paid,
right.
You know that, right?
Yep.
Some guys can handle it. Some guys can't handle it.
Yep.
And because you, in the back of your mind, if I mess up one time, they're going to cut me, and then it just becomes a panic attack. Whereas in college, they cut me. Well, okay, then I just go sit down. The next guy's up, and he'll probably mess up, and I'll be back.
Right.
So it's a little bit different, but he's prepared. He's mentally prepared, and the fact that he's here, he's from here. He went to school nearby. I mean, that's all positive, and the whole thing is really. It's really been a positive situation. We all knew that they were coming close to making a decision that might supplant Kevin.
Yep.
But in the process, they brought him along, so he's actually been there the whole time. And I think from that standpoint, for your first time out, when it's nothing new, right? You're now in the game, but you've been doing everything else with everybody all the way along, and that makes a big difference. Just like with Adamitis, when he came in, he was already there. He wasn't off the street. He'd been going through everything everybody's gone through. The critical part with Chrisman was the holding. That became a moot point also during training camp because he did such a great job. So,
yeah, you're right. It's funny. It's just like, it's a job. It's like any workplace. If you've been somewhere for a year or a couple of years like Drue, you've established some relationships. You understand what the routine's like. I mean, you fit. You feel like you fit, even though your role is changing. But I mean, having that comfort level, it was big. I thought it was a very, very good move for the Bengals to keep him on the practice squad and break him in as such, and both ways. Everybody get comfortable with each other on every level. I think the whole thing was handled very well, and knowing Darren Simmons and the way he approaches things, I'm not surprised that he thought that thing through from, Jump Street to the very beginning to where you are now, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, he's so well prepared, and I can tell you from the standpoint of being that guy that came in off the street. I did it with the Raiders.
Yep.
Very uncomfortable. I did it with the Bengals back in '80, and that was not necessarily, guys were great, but you feel like you got to prove yourself right from day one. You've got to be perfect, and that puts a lot of pressure on you. Whereas they've been watching him punt for 2 years, they know he's more than capable.
Right.
So then it's just a matter of stepping in, and then if there's any animosity, Kevin put a kibosh to that. It's like, no, we're going to make this work for this guy, and we'll go from there. And if the guy he's taking the job from is backing him, or is he supporting him? Not necessarily backing him, but he's supporting him. Then what's anybody else going to say?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. In this football game coming up against Tennessee, this kid Stonehouse.
Yeah.
Oh, he's got a gun. He's got a cannon hanging off his leg, averaging 53 yards a punt, best in the league. 44.8 net, which is basically, what Chrisman did for one game, he's done for 10. That's fourth in the league. 21 inside the 20 leads the league. They are pretty good in that department. That's going to be a very big battle to dictate, long field, short field position. That's going to be an interesting one to watch right there.
It will be. Although they are giving up because of the distance he kicks it. They're giving up, I think, almost between 9 and 10 yards a return.
Yeah.
So that means you beat one guy, that might be 15 to 20 yards. As far as long as there aren't any fair catches caught after the ball bounces, then we're good to go.
Yeah, right. That was
interesting. To back up, the guy that muffed the punt and it went into the end zone.
Yeah. I'm
pretty sure he could just fall on that ball in the end zone because it was a muff.
Yeah,
and it would have been a touchback. It wouldn't have been a safety.
I agree. They have to decide if the momentum of the ball would have gone into the end zone anyway, and he didn't take it in, right? Isn't that what the rule states kind of in that regard? You mentioned Chrisman holding, and he did an outstanding job there. And again, cold, windy.
Yeah.
The field's not the greatest. You got to, sometimes you're dealing with divots that you have to work through and all that kind of thing. And then Money Mac hits from 54 in those conditions, and a couple more over 40. I mean, the dude's crazy, isn't he?
He is so talented, And, had that little glitch for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But never concerned me. I mean, he'll just move on. And then, because I really think that he'll probably hit 15 or 15 in a row. Once he gets back in that groove, because even when he misses, they're always close.
Right.
It's not like he's hitting shanks or something like that. So, yeah, he's back in the groove. And way to do it in Pittsburgh, right? As tough a place there is to kick. Hardly anybody makes long field goals there, and he made 3 over 40, 1 over 50. Nothing bothers him, and that's the biggest thing. And as a kicker, you really kind of have to stay pretty even keel, just because you got to go out and do it again. And, if you miss one, you got to come back and do it. If the punt, if you get a lousy punt, then you might have another one coming out of the end zone that we have to count on you. So kicking's a little different animal. And, it's funny because I see coaches every once in a while. These coaches will come and they trying to get in their punter's head. They'll stand behind him or something. And I'm always thinking, Coach, I'm trying to prepare so I can become the best punter I can. You're over here trying to put this pressure on me. You're not allowing me to prepare. You're not allowing me to do what I need to do so I can be the best I can on Sunday because you want to play some head game with me over here. Let me be so well prepared that you don't have to worry about me having any head problem because I'm going to be so good going in. So these guys, sometimes they overthink themselves.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting. Zach Taylor was talking about on the 54-yarder. He was looking at Darren. Darren was looking at him, and they weren't really speaking. It's like he said there was a long pause there, and Darren looked at him and said, "You want to kick it, don't you?" And Zach goes, "Yeah, I think I do." I mean, because if it doesn't work out, they got good field position.
You're right.
It's a dogfight portion of the game, and but boy, when they had time to contemplate everything, they thought Darren's like, "Look, he's making them from this distance and warm-ups. That's not the issue." But that unspoken word when they looked at each other, and it's like, "Yep, let's do it. Let's get it done." That's a definite sign of confidence. There's no question about that. And in Money Mac, he certainly did live up to it.
Isn't it interesting though? It was the head coach. Usually it's the special. Yeah, coach, let's do it. He can make this. But it's the head coach saying, I want to kick it.
Yeah,
that says a lot right there.
It does. I mean, if Randy Bullock pretty well, and Randy's had a very long and prosperous career in the National Football League. But if it comes down to it, I mean, if it's a last-second field goal, I'm leaning toward Money Mac. I know Randy's hit some. There's no question about it. He's had some incredible kicks during the course of his career, but man, Money Mac's tough to bet against, isn't he?
Oh, he's amazing. I just love his confidence, and it's always good when he goes out and he's going to make it. You just feel confident. You're almost shocked when he misses versus the other way around where he made it. I can't believe he actually made that kick.
Yeah,
no, it doesn't work like that with him.
When you look at it, and we were talking about this a little earlier too, the Tennessee Titans, I mean, they're not a scoring machine. They average 19.3 points a game, and they give up 18.5. There's an 8-point differential in their favor in points scored against points allowed. Yet they've won 7 out of 8 games. It's like, so they're winning a lot of close football games. So it's coming down to field position, special teams, who's going to kick successfully, who's not. Isn't that going to be a big factor in this football game potentially?
Yeah, I mean, isn't the league generally just saying records for close games, like 7 points or less or 8 points or less?
Yeah.
But that's all, as well as I do. Field position's always a factor, and punting well, keeping them inside the 20, make them. The Bengals went over 90 yards, which if you look at the stats, that's like astronomical to have 2 of those in a game like they did and do it as well as they did, have 1 third down and 2 drives over 90. That's crazy.
It is.
That's not typical. What's more typical is you're going to beat it out somewhere in the middle of the field between the 20 and the other 40, and you're going to have some punts. They've punted the ball like the 4th most in the league. So they're getting off. People are getting them off the field. And I think they just rely on Derrick Henry to wear him down. Mm-hmm. And then the defense to play the stellar defense. And really, it's in the red zone, keeping people out of the end zone, I think has been their hallmark as much as anything, because they're giving up quite a few yards. They're well down from where the Bengals are as far as yards per game. And most of it is in the passing game because they're first or second against the run, only giving up like 82 yards.
Yep.
So they're giving up 250 or 60 yards a game passing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and I think part of that is like we were talking about, they grind it, so they minimize in your mind. You're saying, geez, how many possessions am I going to have left? The way they're milking the clock, and it's like, man, and the key for them is they have to get off to good starts, and they do. They've outscored people by 30 points in the first quarter, 32 in the second quarter. So they're plus 62 in the first half. The Bengals are plus 4. And then the Bengals are plus, 49 in the second half. They've had to come from behind in some games. And the Tennessee Titans are minus 51. It's like people are having to throw it to come back against them. So they're not running it that much. And it's like, we don't have that many possessions left. We got to try to chunk them. We got to try to have some explosives. And that all plays right into their hand. And then the final component is, like we've been talking about with special teams, you got a punter that's booming it over 50 yards of punt and almost a 45-yard net, and he's putting you on the long fields to boot.
Yeah.
Now, you better get some explosives because you don't have much time. How many possessions do you have? I mean, you can't, turn around and hand it off every snap. I mean, that's their philosophy of football under Mike Vrabel, and they do it very well.
Very old school, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is.
So you're going to have to, if you may have to throw the ball more, then you've got that defensive line that wreaked havoc last year in the playoffs. And, Simmons has got 6.5 sacks and Weaver's got like 5.5. Another guy's got 7 sacks. And so they're spreading the wealth around. Although if you think about Pittsburgh had 7 in that first game with TJ Watt. TJ Watt was back. I think he had 1 sack, right?
They split a sack.
He split a sack, and then he bounced off Burrow on another one.
Yep.
So they did much better, and I would expect them to do much better than. I mean, it's really different guys this year playing against them.
Yeah, it's interesting, and people say, "Oh, you guys overrate this." I'm not sure. I mean, if it were reversed, I know how I'd feel about it. The Bengals went down there, knocked them out of the playoffs. Tannehill threw 3 interceptions. He didn't take care of the football. He had to go see a sports psychologist to get over. I mean, it was such an impactful thing on him. And there's no way that they don't want to have some restitution, man. It's like, man, you came to our place and you knocked us out of the playoffs. That was the number 1 seed. They were in the number 1 seed in the playoffs, and the Bengals went down there and knocked them out of it. So, I mean, it's like restitution time. Here we go. This is going to be interesting.
So the offensive line is going to go in. Okay, he's got 7. They're not getting 7 sacks again this year. We're not letting that happen. They've got something to play for too. I mean, so you get that going. My philosophy is once you're into the game and you get smacked around a few times, most of that stuff, then you just play the game, right?
Right.
It's that first part of the game when everybody's fired up, and then you kind of settle into the game.
Yep.
Get into the rhythm of the game, and you see where chips fall.
Yeah, and I mean it's going to be it's old school football, and one of the big things is taking care of the football. And how about this weird stat with Pittsburgh? I mean, the Bengals went -2 in the most recent game here they just played and still won the game. They went -5 in the first game. They go 8 quarters and don't get a takeaway against the Steelers, and they give it away 7 times and could have and should have won both football games. But they're -7 against Pittsburgh and +8 against everybody else.
That's
they're +1 in the season. It is nuts.
That is nuts. Well, what is Pittsburgh? +7 against the Bengals and -8 against everybody else?
Yeah, and they're -1 in the season, no doubt. And that's going to be an interesting thing, too, because very, very similar are these 2 football teams with respect to the turnover department. Both teams have 13 takeaways, tied for 14th in the NFL. They're both right there with 13 takeaways. Tennessee has 11 giveaways. The Bengals have 12. Tennessee's +2. They're 7th in the NFL. The Bengals are +1. They're tied for 8th. So the turnover situation is fairly even Steven as well. I think this game has the earmarkings of being another final who has the ball last kind of one possession game. I think it could very well end up being one of those kind of days.
Yeah, I agree. Although the Bengals have played them pretty well. I mean, going back to Zach's first year, they came in with on a big win streak, and the Bengals handled them pretty well. And
yeah,
they've played them tough. I mean, there's some teams you match up. I think they match up pretty well with them. For some reason, they struggle against the Browns. Just the matchup there is a struggle for the Bengals, and so we'll see. Everything indicates it's going to be a close game. I like a last possession game, and I wouldn't certainly been surprised. I thought that was going to happen in the Carolina game also. That certainly didn't happen. And
right.
They've been playing. Everything they played had been close at that point.
You're right. And at halftime, it's 35-0. The Bengals
that was crazy.
315 yards, and Carolina has 32.
Even Atlanta had been playing a lot of close games, and they'd beaten Tampa Bay a couple weeks before, and then the Bengals come in and put it to them. So,
yeah, and it's very interesting. I mean, the Bengals point differential. I mean, they've had let's see, in 4 of their 5 wins, they've won by double digit. They've won by 12 points or more, anywhere from 12 to 21 points in 4 of their 5 wins. Tennessee, I mean, their biggest win is their last victory. They won by 10 points, 27-17 over Green Bay. And then they got smoked by Buffalo, and the Bengals, their worst loss was to Cleveland. So both teams have had one stinker, but overall, on a week-to-week basis, man, Tennessee has been in a bunch of close ones. They have a pretty good understanding of how to finish those tight football games. There's no doubt. We shall see.
I guess it helps when you have a 250-pound just like a train back there. You just wear people down, and late in the game.
Yep. In my mind, it all comes down to he's a freakazoid. I mean, he's a Martian. He's not human. It's crazy. But the Bengals last year, they held him to 60 yards, and he made a little over 3 yards a carry. And what they did was they made him make his first cut behind the line of scrimmage, or worst case scenario at the line of scrimmage. You let that beast, like you said, 250 or plus, at the second or third level, full steam, and he hasn't had to make a cut yet. Are you kidding me? You're in trouble. I don't care how many people you throw on there to gang tackle him. He gets that head of steam going, man. You got to make him run east and west. If he squares them up, those pads up, and is going north and south, he's a problem.
Yeah.
A big time problem.
He is. There's always something, right? There's always something. Everybody can play in this league, and you just don't know who's going to show up every week, and hopefully you start to play with some consistency, which the Bengals offense certainly has seemed to have done over these last several weeks, except for Cleveland, which I think they were heading that way in that game. And then they get the tip pass and kind of went sideways from there. But the offense is clicking pretty well, and they're taking whatever they're being given. So in Atlanta, it was the pass. Carolina, they were running the ball like crazy. Yesterday, they took away the run, so they threw the ball down the field. Yeah,
and Joe Burrow's doing such a great job of checking it down if he needs to. I mean, he's taking profits. He's not trying to go for the home run. He's like, all right, I'm hitting my back, and then hitting him in stride where they can get yards after catch, and they're doing a lot of things extremely well. There are no two ways about that. This one's going to be an interesting football game, and man, not Henry. The thing about him, Jim, as big as he is, that dude can run. He runs you over and run away from you. That's double embarrassment. He runs you over, and then he runs away from everybody else. I mean, it's
Bo Jackson,
yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, tell you, we both were fortunate to play for quite a while in the National Football League, and there's nothing better. It's great catching up with you and talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. And in my mind, when you came to the Cincinnati Bengals, I was like, this guy, he's the most different kicker I've ever been around. And I'm like, what his personality is like, he's one of the guys. Well, you played all different kinds of sports. You weren't like a European soccer style kicker. Jim Breech was an athlete that just happened to be an excellent kicker as well. I mean, you were a heck of a point guard. You were a heck of a baseball player. You could do it all, my man.
I didn't play soccer. My high school didn't have soccer till my junior year. And
wow,
it was during basketball season. I'm like, I love playing basketball. So, and then our soccer team, we were such an integrated high school that 10 of our 11 starters were born outside the U.S.
Wow.
So when you saw them practice, it's like, these guys are so far beyond what I could even conceive, because they've been doing it since they were little kids.
Yeah.
They had one American board kid. They got him. He was a big kid. They stuck him in a fullback, and they said, just run people over. And everybody else did their thing, and he just kind of stood back there and beat people up. And they won the city title like 5 years in a row.
Wow.
So that was my only exposure, really, like, except for gym class. We all had a gym class. We had to do some soccer. Yeah. So it was watching Jan Stenerud or watching the Gogolaks and just trying to emulate what I saw.
Man, I'll tell you, that's a tribute to your athletic ability. You're an outstanding golfer. And how similar the mechanics of the leg swing and kicking as opposed to the hip turn and all that in golf? Is there any similarity there?
Totally. It's extremely similar. So when Bruce Coslett was my special teams coach in 81, before he became the offensive coordinator, that's how he really didn't know kicking, but he knew golf.
Yeah.
We would always equate it to the golf swing, and it made perfect sense, because the same thing, if you come out of it, you push it. If you hang back, you pull it. I mean, there's all these things that you do. They're the same thing that happened in golf. So yeah, it was very similar.
Well, you had a brilliant career. There's no question about it. And you're doing a lot of great things. Jim Breech, fine human being, first class, top shelf. Appreciate your time, and we'll do it again.
Anytime, Lap. Always enjoy talking to you, and always enjoy talking Bengal football.
You're the best.
At First Star Logistics, we're a very strict company that really puts the pressure on our employees. Brakes? What are those?
That's what I'm talking about, Icky. Get the body right, then the mind's right.
Gotta get that body right.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Become a star with a chance to earn the highest commission percentages in the industry as a freight broker agent. Check out firststarlogistics.com.